I believe where people are not being as courageous is where they're not doing their own personal work. That's where I think people are not being as courageous. And I don't say that from a place of judgment. I want to be clear. But what I know is that we as leaders show up with all of our stuff, whether we're conscious of it or not conscious of it. And I think the work and responsibility of leadership, if you are going to take a position of responsibility, then you have the responsibility to do your work. So you can understand where your biases are showing up, where your triggers are showing up, where it allows you to lead more responsively than reactively. So I think it's really important, and it's the work that we're doing here across the Division of Student Affairs with our leadership team, is really calling on our colleagues who are in leadership positions to do their work, because it matters so very much. And I think the cost of not doing it is immense, because it's denying the truth of who we are. It's denying our greatest capacities. It's not allowing us to lead at our best selves. And so I think that's a really big cost.
Yeah. Patty Perillo. Welcome, Patty.
Good to see you, Heather.
Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Patty serves, as I said, as the Vice President for Student Affairs, and she is also affiliate professor in the Student Affairs program at the University of Maryland, where she provides leadership for 16 departments and a team of more than 4,000 staff and students. A past president of ACPA, certified executive coach, and nationally recognized student affairs leader, Patty has spent more than 3 decades advancing student learning, belonging, and community across higher education. And I'll also note my earliest ACPA experiences happened to be when Patty Perillo was president. So grateful for you, Patty, and the path that you laid for so many of us.
Right back at you, Heather. Right back at you.
And also joining us, as I mentioned, Earl Cabellon. Earl is the Director of Staff Experience and Culture in the University of Maryland's Division of Student Affairs, where he leads efforts to cultivate an inclusive and engaging workplace culture for more than 1,500 employees. A certified professional coach and longtime student affairs educator, he focuses on talent development, employee experience, and creating environments where staff can thrive. Welcome, Earl.
Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for having me here. Good to be here.
Good to have you as well. And I'm so excited for our conversation today. So let's join in. Let's start with just introduction. So feel free to share anything beyond the brief bio that I just read that you would like listeners to know about your work. And then let's start with an easy question, hopefully. What is bringing you energy and joy in your work right now? And Earl, why don't you kick us off?
Amen.
Sure. Well, thank you again, Heather. And let me just start off by saying thank you to you and the Student Affairs Now team for the amazing work you've been doing around this podcast. Truly, there are many of us in the profession that are grateful to you. So thank you. Before I start, I know that my last name holds some meaning with my brother, Ed Cabellon, who is also, we share the same last name and we share the same love for the work that we do in higher education and student affairs. So shout out to my brother, the other Cabellon in student affairs. My origin story, it started 22 years ago, and I come from a campus recreation background. And it was there that I started to really fall in love with this work around people and human development. And, for many years, I was managing facilities and I was working with student employees and helping shape culture within the student employment program. And then as my career evolved, I learned a lot about human resource management and working with our full-time staff and doing development work for 50 full-time staff and 900 student employees. And so I have to give a nod to kind of my origin story to Campus Rec. And then after the pandemic, I got this amazing opportunity in the Office of the Vice President's office to do this continued work, and grateful to Patty for noticing and giving me the opportunity to lead and to shape some of the things I was doing at a departmental level and scale it up to a divisional level. And as you mentioned too, like I am a certified and professional coach, and I think part of that leans into what I'm going to share with you all today from my perspective and the coaching mindset, which in a bottom line way is being and leading more curious, open, and non-judgmental. And really at the heart of it, knowing that people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And so that's kind of the lens I'm looking at leadership and this topic today that we're talking about. And so what gives me energy to your question, I think we're starting to talk about the quiet thing out loud, which is more centering the student affairs workforce. And really excited that we get the opportunity to talk about that today, and just a joy that it's a national conversation. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Earl. Great to meet you. And yes, shout out to your brother, Ed, who I've known for a couple of decades, I feel like. The Student Affairs Technology Task Force is how I first met Ed. It feels like forever ago.
yeah.
Patty, welcome. What else would you like to share, and what is bringing you energy and joy right now?
Just time with the two of you. Like, how fun is it to spend time with two of my favorite colleagues ever? Heather, when you talked about my 3 decades in student affairs, I'm like, I think we've been walking alongside each other for much of that, Heather, if not all of that.
Yeah.
And Earl, like, what a joy it is to work alongside you every day, to have recognized your capacity and to see what you were doing within a department and to say, I want to retain you. I do not want to lose you. Can you come and do this across the division? And so one of the things that brings me joy is to work alongside colleagues like you, Earl, every day to do work that creates the conditions for our people to thrive. There is no doubt about that. I also know that what's bringing me lots of joy is this time of year, in particular on college campuses, like the celebrations of our students. Like, I'm still looking at videos and pictures, and like it's just like, how lucky are we to walk alongside students at such a critical time in their lives, and to have an opportunity to celebrate them. So that's certainly bringing me joy. Two other things I'll mention in terms of what's bringing me joy, particularly in my work life, is we have a strategic plan in the Division of Student Affairs, and two of our commitments, we put students first and we invest in our people. And they are just so central to who we are and what we do and how we live and lead. And today, what we're focused on, Heather, thanks to you in this invitation, is ways in which we are investing in our people. And the last that I'm so excited about is that we just launched our co-curricular learning outcomes for the Division of Student Affairs. It is such a joyful time to be here and do this work. And I just love the co-creation. I love the deep commitment. I just feel very lucky to work alongside just such talented people.
Having been on a team that has worked on learning outcomes, oh my goodness, it is a lot of work and such an incredible opportunity then to tell the story alongside, those learning outcomes, which will hopefully kind of make that easier across your division. So
You're
cool.
right. Yep,
So
absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So Patty, I'm going to stay with you for a second. In your talk at the Reigns Colloquium in the spring, you called for bold action. This is one of the things that I wrote down, and courage. And I think one of the things that struck me is that it's hard sometimes to take bold action and have courage, because sometimes leaders choose comfort and compliance over courage. Where do you see that happening, and what do you see are the costs of not leaning into bold action and courage?
It's such an interesting question, Heather. And I think I want to begin with wanting to be cautious about the dichotomy between comfort and compliance and bold action.
Yep.
Because I really do believe that all of us are doing the best that we can. I just, and in some of the most unprecedented, complicated times. Recently, my good colleague, who's an assistant vice president here, Dr. James McShea, and I co-wrote a chapter in Adriana Kezar's latest book. It's the second edition of our Higher Education Administration's work for social justice and equity. And we wrote a chapter on the work that we're doing here in the Division of Student Affairs around intentional and purposeful leadership to create more equitable and just environments. And one of the things that we named in that is that where you work matters, and in what state you work in matters, and that it's not always easy for everyone. We feel very fortunate to be where we are at the state of Maryland, at the University of Maryland, a state and a community and higher ed institution that's deeply invested in this work. So we have been able to stay the course. That allows us to be courageous, right? It just really does. And I'm witnessing across the country so many of my colleagues who are doing the best that they can to align their values with their work in really, really difficult times. Now, we all know that there are some people that have preemptively complied, right? But I don't know the pressures that they were dealing with. I don't know the cost had they not. I don't know that. But what I do know is that you cannot do the work of education and not do the work of justice and equity, right? When I think about where the question that you asked specifically, I went to the place of in this moment in time where higher education is being called under fire. And a lot of the work that we've done forever in student affairs is really being caught on the carpet, right? And so while some are complying, again, I don't know the conditions in which that's being created, and I want to offer all kinds of grace and opportunity for that. I believe where people are not being as courageous is where they're not doing their own personal work. That's where I think people are not being as courageous. And I don't say that from a place of judgment. I want to be clear. But what I know is that we as leaders show up with all of our stuff, whether we're conscious of it or not conscious of it. And I think the work and responsibility of leadership, if you are going to take a position of responsibility, then you have the responsibility to do your work so you can understand where your biases are showing up, where your triggers are showing up, where it allows you to lead more responsively than reactively. So I think it's really important, and it's the work that we're doing here across the Division of Student Affairs with our leadership team is really calling on our colleagues who are in leadership positions to do their work because it matters so very much. And I think the cost of not doing it is immense because it's denying the truth of who we are. It's denying our greatest capacities. It's not allowing us to lead at our best selves. And so I think that's a really big cost.
Yeah. Yeah, it really strikes me to think about all of the different contextual variances that are happening across the country. And certainly as I look across, and even just going to ACPA, right? There were people who were like having to pay for going to the conference completely out of their own budget because their institutions or states wouldn't allow them to go. And I think a big piece of this is that when we invest in our people and we pour resources into them, they end up being better for our students, right? So ultimately, I love that those are two centered concepts in your strategic plan. But I'm really struck by how sometimes that care for people gets minimized in higher education spaces. And Patty, I've seen you as a person who leads with care. It's part of who you are. But you talked about in your talk about how that's really a radical act right now. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you develop that. And then when they think, when you think you're being caring, sometimes you're well-intended, but that could actually have a backfire. So what do you think might be some of the pitfalls of when people think they're being caring, but they're really not?
Oh, there's so much there, Heather. It's ever since I've known you, you've asked such great, deep questions.
Multiple part questions.
Yes, so. Multiple part. And they're just like, there's just so much there. And before I respond, which I'm certainly going to, I noticed that when I talked earlier, Earl lit up. When I talked about where people might not be courageous was when they're not doing their own work. And he lit up. And Earl, I just want to better understand, what was that response that you had related to when I said that?
Yeah, no, I mean, what the reaction you noticed, Patty, was that it goes back to my leadership journey around being more coach-like. And when we are in that mindset and doing our deep work, can we really emerge as the people we want to be, right? And so that's why I lit up. And I just want to just double down on what Patty talked about around just extending grace to leaders. Leaders are struggling, and you know, there's a lot happening. And I love how, Patty, you're just globally talking about, you know, leaders are dealing with different things at different states and all of that. And I think that's context worth noting. But yes, the deep work is definitely something that we can encourage people to do more of, so they can be better for people. So thank you for naming that, Patty.
Absolutely. And Heather, you know this. I don't think care should ever be a radical act. It should just be given in so many ways. I think about this a lot. Like, we are all living our lives when we come to work. We're living our lives side by side, right? Like, if we can't care for each other, then what's the point of living? Not even working. Like, what's the point of living? And so I don't believe that care should ever be a radical act. I think it's got to be a part of who we are and what we're about. It's a deep value of mine. And because it's a value of mine, it feels just easy to live out. I know that for some people also, some may say that care right now in this moment in time in particular is a form of resistance, right? It's a form of resistance. I think that far too often people forget that care is a community responsibility as well as an individual responsibility. I can't tell you how many times I sit in meetings with my VP colleagues from across the country in many different forums, and there's a lot of, you know, people may be expecting too much for us, and they got to care for themselves. That's true. That's individual self-care is essential. I think sometimes we can forget that care is also a community responsibility. And if you're not creating the conditions for people to thrive, to flourish, to be well and healthy, then their best selves won't be there. And Heather, you said it earlier, like I'm an educator. Yes, I have a title as an administrator, but I'm an educator. And one of the precepts for education is modeling the way. And so we can't bring out the best in our students if we don't bring out the best in ourselves, right? Like, so we have to make sure that our staff continue to evolve and grow and learn. And I believe that one of the best formulas for that is to create a caring, connected community. I witnessed that in my own childhood. I witnessed that growing up, that what happens when you wrap your arms around individuals and our communities and create a caring environment. It's fodder for all the growth and development that we really hope and wish and pray for, depending on who you are, for our people and our communities. I also think it's really important for leaders to recognize that it is not a one and done. It's got to be reflected in all the things that you say, but in the things that you do. Again, let's talk about a learning precept, the modeling, right? People witness how we act, not just what you say. And if that's inconsistent, people are not going to feel the sense of care that may be there. And again, it's not a one and done. It's got to be integrated and permeated throughout the entire organization. Systems, structures, who you hire, your processes, your policies, your day-to-day living, and all of the things that surround the work that we do. And so we have lots of colleagues here in the Division of Student Affairs that think about all of those things, and where is it that we might remove barriers that don't allow us to live into the value of being a caring, connected community, because that's what we talk about here.
Yeah. So you created this position, which is such a cool title, Earl. I can't wait to unpack, all of that. And I think it's a title I've not heard. I've heard some, what was it? Vice President of Student Experience or UX type role, but like to really focus on staff experience and culture, I think this is pretty uncommon. So talk a little bit about what that means. What are the components of your role? What is staff experience? And why maybe should other senior leaders be paying more attention to this?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's something that, again, was part of Patty's calculus to how she wanted to invest in people. And to have a position, a director position that signals that we want to invest in our divisional staff was, clear and evident in the title and by design. So staff experience was kind of what was chosen. Given the portfolio that I have that I'm responsible for. So to answer your first question, staff experience to us is really the whole arc of someone's time here at the University of Maryland in the Division of Student Affairs. I would argue from the day that we post that position, I think we're really intentional about how we're, putting out language around our positions to the time that they have to do their exit interview, right? And like everything in between, because there is things within that employee experience that matter most. And so my job is everything in between that. In terms of learning and growth and ensuring that our people have opportunities to learn and grow and take advantage of the opportunities through collaborations with our departments. My portfolio also has some divisional HR responsibilities, which in the original intent, we were kind of negotiating that. But I think for me, from a policy and systems level perspective, I get to be at the table with Patty and leaders around some of the HR policies and class and compensation and equity. And so it just gives me a deeper breadth of just not rolling out programs, but just more of a systems level leader at the table with expertise around that. And so, some examples of just things that we're doing here as the director of staff experience and culture is really, again, having these natural touch points for staff to engage in their employee experience. So, for example, we do a new employee orientation for the Division of Student Affairs colleagues. And what I think people appreciate most, you talk about care and courage. I mean, Patty is in the space with our people. And if there's one thing I know to be true when I see the evaluations, it's that people appreciate leaders in the room, connecting, sharing a meal, talking about what it's like, and I think people appreciate that. I also think too, in the employee experience within the division, we have town halls where people can come together and coalesce and get information and connect with other colleagues across campus. Patty talked about the year-end celebration. We just filled a room of colleagues from all across the division to come together and celebrate the year. We have community circles that Patty meets with leaders within a certain job classification and empowers them to go out and be in community and thematize what are you hearing from them. And Patty listens and she takes notes and she acts. And so when you have people leading that way, it sends a signal. And I think the strategy behind the director of staff experience was a signal that we are going to invest in our people and our leaders are going to also model the way in terms of how we're showing up. I think your second question is an interesting one. And, I want to be clear that for some senior leaders, some of your listeners, you may be at a small institution, you may be at a community college. And so I want to be clear that everyone's in different kind of arenas right now. But if there was one thing I would ask people to pay attention to is, really look at the manager experience, the manager and staff experience, and how we're training up leaders and managers. I know when I first got hired, there was a pulse survey that went out, and we learned that managers are struggling, right? And so, how can we support them? The other piece is also just looking at your job design. I think it's something that's, I know for me and others across student affairs, we're looking at job design, and we know that workload and burnout is a thing. And so how are we looking at job descriptions at a systems level, and like what are we really asking staff to do? And no judgment, I'm not saying that we're not doing a good job, but for me, it's important to look underneath the hood sometimes to see what is happening. And so that would be my ask of senior leaders, to look at the manager experience, and then, might you look at how you're crafting jobs, would be just two things I would name.
It makes me think about, Earl, what you said. Heather, it leads me to a question for you. The fact that this was an important question for you, the fact that when I spoke at the colloquium, the sense of care that I talked about really spoke to you. What was it about that spoke to you, and why was this an important question for you to explore?
Yeah, I thank you for that. Also, I think part of it is because we're living through this really important and very uncertain time.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes during periods of uncertainty, people kind of close in on their own,
Yeah.
and I think it can be sometimes harder to be that hopeful optimist or radical optimist. I also think that when we prioritize staff, and I like what you said, Earl, about managers, because who you work for matters, right? And that relationship between and and as a community, right? And part of why I think that also really resonated for me is because 2 years ago, a little under 2 years ago, I took a new role outside of student affairs, and I have a team of people. Part of it was I didn't have resources prior. Now I have a team of people, and I recognize how important the culture and experience part of my job is, in kind of creating that for the folks who are my direct reports and for the folks who then report to them, right? Um, so that's such a critical component, but I don't know that we teach it well either, right? Like supervision isn't something you necessarily learn about in grad school. You get to be a better supervisor sometimes by having a really terrible supervisor.
That's true. That's true.
So,
Heather, it's interesting. Marcia Baxter McGold and Peter McGold asked me to write in one of their books around complicated times in higher education. I forget the title of it, but I was doing a response to a faculty member who wrote about supervision, and I was the practitioner who was responding to supervision. And what surprised me, and maybe it shouldn't have, but it did surprise me, is that when I was writing this chapter about supervision, looking at the literature, there's very, very little on supervision in student affairs. I had to go to, organizational development or the business world or HR. Like there is very little on supervision. And the research is really clear that people leave their bosses, not necessarily their jobs, right? And so who you work for creates such a different lived experience. And so, if we do not invest in those people who are supervising others, then I can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. Earl can't do it alone. You need to make sure that you create an entire ecosystem that is providing that kind of support. And that's exactly why Earl's position exists. And that's the stuff that we are really invested in, because you have to shore up supervisors. You just have to.
yeah. Yeah, I think we can all tell stories, right, about supervisors who have not been there, right, or for whom, time in your chair mattered more than the quality of life, right? And I think about that quality versus quantity, and what is productivity, what is professional, like all of these things socially constructed around systems of supremacy, and the idea of kind of dismantling that, but to the benefit of both the people who are in it, because we need humane workplaces, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Heather, go ahead, Earl. You go.
Let me add one more thing, because I think it's important to name, is that yes, we know that the manager experience is important, and there are really good supervisors in this field that I know and I love that do great work. And what you just talked about, Heather, is that when the system is off balance, no good manager is going to, that will just compound the problem even more. So wanted to name that in the space, that it's a both and. It's leadership, it's systems, and then the conditions that our people are working in. Really, really important and very complicated stuff. But the systems things, I wanted to throw that in there as well.
Yeah. And I want to thread two things that you said as well, Heather, particularly when you talked about supremacy, and it was in a particular question that you asked before, one of the things that I've come to understand, particularly in higher education and certainly in student affairs, we continue to reward those who are on committees, on working groups, who publish. It's like the more and more and more you do, and I think that high achieving is in a white supremacy culture, right? In the Division of Student Affairs, what we reward is people who act with loving kindness. So when we have town halls, people get an award.
Yep.
Like I literally read stories about things that people have done to love and care for one another. It's not who published the most or who has more ribbons on their like it's not about that, because I think that continues to perpetuate the quantity that you just talked about, right? The expectation of more is better versus being is who we've got to be about. And when you hear these stories about what our colleagues are doing to love and support one another, like one of my favorite stories is one of my colleagues in dining, like hired a staff member who didn't speak English, but he wanted to learn how to drive because he'd take 3 different forms of public transportation to get to his work. He learned English. I mean, he learned Spanish, and he then became the partner in teaching him
Wow.
how to get his driver's license. And then he helped him buy a car, and then he helped him how to drive. Like he didn't have to do any of that, right? Like let us honor that kind of support for one another. And that's it's one of the ways when I talked about it's not just a one and done. It's got to permeate all of what you do. That's just one example of the permeating all that we do.
Yeah. I'm thinking about kind of the challenging time that we're in, and a big part of it, and I talk about this periodically with my team, but the things that are pinging every day, right? Whether it's the 24-hour news cycle or the latest, whatever, they're all within our sphere of interest, right? Like we care about those things because they will impact us, but we can't really influence that stuff that's happening. We can care about it, but we can't really do anything about it. And then at the end of the day, it's the things that we can really control, which are really just our own reactions, attitudes, behaviors, that kind of thing. But sphere of influence, sphere of control, when there's so much uncertainty, and I'm thinking particularly around resources right now, because I think budget cuts are happening in our campus, but I know in lots of other places.
Mm-hmm.
How do you create culture when people are pinging all the time by all of this external noise that is consequential, but you can't really do anything about? I'd love to hear what either of you think on that.
Earl, paper, rock, scissors? No, you go. You go.
Sure. I think that this is so important, and I'll cut right to the chase. I think this is where Patty talks about leaders doing their deep work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said it beautifully, Heather. It's like we can only control what we can do ourselves, right? And I start with me in everything. And so what has surprised me, for me, I'll say for me, is that as someone who's deeply empathetic and deeply in touch with my feelings, my emotions, it's really easy for me to get sucked into the struggling colleague who just had a death in their family or going through IVF and holding space for them. And I think for me, I'm learning that, again, when I'm doing my own work, I'm able to do the things that I can do so I can show up for others. That's a superpower, and I have access to it. It's free, and I can do my own work in ways that are impactful. I've been using this term, and Heather, I don't know if I heard this in one of your podcasts, but one of your guests talked about courageous humility.
Yeah. Such a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like what has surprised me about as we're doing this work that Patty and I have been embarking on and our leadership team is this notion of courageous humility. And I thought about Patty because, it's something that I witness her as a leader do day in and day out, right? The ability to say the things that need to be said
Mm-hmm.
and be okay with it, right? And what surprises me is that it resonates with some, and for others, maybe not. And Patty doesn't hold that as anything, but just it is.
Mm-hmm.
And she's vulnerable enough to show in that humility that if she doesn't know the answer, she doesn't know the answer. And I think there's something about creating culture and having that courageous humility that I believe our people say, huh, that's interesting. It's appreciated. And it's something we need more of in our leaders. And I wonder if more people did that, um, would there be less kind of ruminating in our mind and doing all that stuff? So again, at a time when things are hard, the temptation really is to lead harder or go all in and control and direct and like do that, when the actual work, in my opinion, is to pause, to listen more, to extend grace, and then start with yourself. So
I feel like we should drop the mic and end right now. Look at
That
that.
was brilliant. That was
I
brilliant.
agree.
Yeah.
And I want to be really clear that, Earl, I appreciate some of the things you're saying, but what I've come to learn is that it's not of me. One of the reasons why it resonates with you, Earl, and why this resonates with you, Heather, is because it is who you are too. I think more often than not, than we hear somebody talk or see somebody do something, we're like, yes. It's not because of what they're doing. It's because they're holding a mirror up to what's within you. And so we are all caring, compassionate leaders and want the world to be more so, and want to talk about, so how do we make that happen? Because you're right, Heather, and you're right, Earl, in complicated, messy times, which we are in, people can just hunker down, right? When resources become limited and people just want to take care of their own. And I think that our work is about opening people up. And I think the way that we do that, there's not the way, there are many ways to do that. But I think that one of the ways, that we do that is to encourage and invite people to be in the present moment. And so one of the things that we've done a lot of in the Division of Student Affairs is open up to lots of people meditative practices. And I will begin meetings with breathing or kindness meditation or just to center ourselves. Because, Heather, you're right, things come at us in all different ways. One of the things that I do, and I know that some people don't like this, and I'm okay with that, is that when we are together in a meeting, there are no laptops and there are no phones. Because it is so easy. I know what I do I know I do it myself. If I've got a laptop in front of me, I try to listen, but things come in and I feel like I got to respond. And so it is creating opportunities for us to be present with each other, because what I believe to be true, and this is a lesson I learned from my family and my mom in particular, is that um, all good things happen in the context of good relationships.
Yeah.
And you have to foster that. So when things become really tough and really hard, and the world sometimes feels like it's just almost hard to bear sometimes, if you have good partnerships and relationships, it's always going to be okay. You can find your way through together, but you have to invest in that. And I think being present to ourselves, which is part of the meditative, and being present to others are some of the things that you do to make that happen.
Yeah. And people know when you're not paying attention too, right? I feel like that's the other thing. I'll be in a meeting and it's clear, it might be on a screen, which that makes it even harder to not use your laptop when you're literally have to use your laptop to join the meeting.
Right, right.
But then you're like, wait a second, like I'm just speaking into the void, right? It's hard to be kind of authentic when you know that there's so many other things that people are focusing on.
And Heather, I think to that point, which I think is really great, is that I think that what people want more than anything is to be connected, right? We are wired for human connection, and we miss that opportunity too often than not.
Yeah.
Because we're all over the place, right? So connection only happens when you are with someone.
Yeah. Physically. I mean, I think that's the other thing that we got too good at, using this medium, which I feel lucky to have the opportunity to do our podcast through Zoom, but like, how much greater would it be if we were in person having this conversation, right?
Yes.
And I feel like that's the thing that we sacrifice, right? And so particularly for staff, and my guess is you have staff in your division who are student facing, right? Like students are walking to their office, and if they're working remotely, now I'm all about like making sure people have the flexibility they need to do what they need to do. But like, if you're a student facing staff person, having the ability to greet that student, and then also have the water cooler conversations with your colleagues and be able to, share a practical joke or the other day. This is going to make my team freak out, but we had a cockroach in our office. And I tell you, everybody came out of their offices. We were all like universally disgusted. And then I have an award actually, excellence in bug disposal and restorer of office harmony. So I gave that award to one of my staff. And honestly, I feel like you missed that if you're not, in person that particular day. I don't know. I don't know that we need to go into the merits or failures of remote work, but I do think that in person is really critical and beneficial.
And I think that you said it. I think it's about the balance, right? It's not an either or. It's about how do you create the balance so you have both end.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about how someone who might be listening today might be thinking to themselves, well, my leaders talk about this, but I don't experience it that way. And maybe you have some folks in your division that are like, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid or whatever it is. Like, how do you bring people who are skeptical or tired or distrustful, or who have literally been in previous supervisory or division relationships where they have experienced trauma, along into this kind of perspective, because I think that's another challenge that we all face.
Pat, do you want to take this one first? I'll piggyback off of you.
Sure. I first, I would trust them that was their experience, and I'd want to learn more about how is it you feel cared for? Because I think it's true of lots of humans. Like, we often care for people in the ways that we want to be cared for. And so maybe the leader is caring in a way that's, I think, really intentional, and they're trying, but it's not landing for this person because it's not how the person feels cared for. So I'd want to better understand a little bit more about what makes them feel cared for. The other thing that I would say is, I think sometimes when that happens, when you're not feeling like a supervisor is paying attention to you or a supervisor cares for you, it's a very real lived experience. But we can get caught in this kind of frozen place of frustration or anger or resentment or whatever it might be, and forget our power, our own power. And I think that if you want a village, you've got to be a villager. And so I think that, and I'm using that quote from, we just had a staff retreat and somebody said it and I wrote it down. I was like, I'm going to use that soon. And this is the first time I'm using it. I think, it goes back earlier when I said that care is both a community responsibility and an individual responsibility. And they can be in balance sometimes, and they can be out of balance sometimes. But I think the work of each of us is to try to think about what are the ways that we get them in balance. And I remember when I was a hall director, I realized pretty early on that I had more influence in some ways because of my way that I led and who I was connected to than the vice president. And I was like, I can help create a better place just by keep doing what I'm doing versus just waiting for somebody else to do it. And I do not negate at all the power dynamics in situations where leaders absolve themselves in their responsibilities. Like, I get all that, and I don't say that lightly at all. And what I want to do is to empower people to lead in the ways that they hope that they are led, because they will then create ripple effects and influence that's really, really important. Or what would you add to that, or maybe disagree with or change? Or
No, I mean, I was going to say the first thing I would say is I believe you, and I would not talk you out of it. Again, bringing in that coaching mindset, that curiosity. What does it mean to be cared for? How do we have better conversations with staff around the things that they're bringing to us? Because the Earl 10 years ago would come in and problem solve and jump in and save the day and come in solution mode, right? And as leaders, I think we need to pause and slow down. And when staff are really experiencing that, it is our job to listen with the most deep empathy, to not feel like we have to solve their problems, but to get really clear, what are you experiencing in this moment? How is that impacting you? and what choices might you want to take forward to, get into some action, right? And maybe it's doing what Patty is suggesting, giving the agency back to them and figuring that out. So again, I think to the staff member, that's what I would say. That's how I would show up. And um, I'm not saying that's the right or only way, but I think it's a way that for me has centered the human being who is struggling and getting curious about what need is not being met and get clear about that so then they can make the best decision possible they can to take action uh, for their responsibility. As Patty said, it's an individual responsibility as a villager. I love that. I'm going to steal that too, Patty. So that's what I would say.
I'm thinking about Minecraft villagers right now. I played a lot of Minecraft in my household with two kids who are big gamers. But the villagers crack me up because they're kind of like, they're in it, but they're NPCs, right? So they're like roaming around, maybe not doing what they're supposed to do. I don't know. Anyway, villagers. I'm thinking about, kind of this thread around the concept of belonging. And I think maybe in kind of the post-DEI era, we've moved everything into that category. Is that we're just going to talk about belonging because that's the buzzword right now. And one of my staff in my office has taught me a lot about this, and she talks about it as like belonging is what we want the institution, the condition we want this institution to create, but the individual needs to feel like they matter. So mattering is maybe a better approach. We talk about this a lot with students, but I think, what do you do with employees, right? You get them a name tag, you give them a sweatshirt that has your unit, your unit logo on it, but like, that's not belonging. So like, what is it that we need to do to infuse belonging for staff?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And so I'll try to bottom line this. But I think it's important, like you said, you have to get curious and ask the questions. What does that mean? And what is the impact? And why is this important? And I think, for me, belonging is the feeling that someone is accepted within the group or the staff, right? And I think for us, from the DSA lens, like we try to be intentional about creating communities. And I've been trying to create this within our professional development offering in our blueprint, right? So like take the supervisors of student employees, right? 300 of these folks who've never been together, but yet are doing similar work, right? And now we have a community coming together every so often to talk about what are the things happening. And we've seen collaborations across campus, like, someone from Recwell will go to Res Life and do a presentation. And you start to see these things happening. And I think within the belonging conversations, we're doing that. We're bringing people together so they feel connected. And I know that leaders in our division are also doing the same thing within their units. And so, again, I think it's another kind of systems level thing that I think we need to talk more about in student affairs, that we need to be intentional as we design the employee experience. And I know Dr. Kevin McClure of the Caring University has talked about this. And I think it's our time to start thinking about how we embed it, how do we socialize it, and how do we put it into the fabric of how we want employees to experience. And again, I'm going to shine Patty's light because I think when we created our team administration team, I think that was something that Patty was mindful of, right? Like there was a director of finance and IT, and like where were they living? And she had the forethought to say, no, this group needs a team. They need to be together, and it's created such synergy. And again, another free decision that costs nothing, but just curiosity got us to have this sense of belonging as a team and such. So again, in a bottom line kind of way, that's what I would offer. But
Patty, what would you say is the difference between institutions that say they value belonging and those that are actually building it within their units?
The difference. I don't know if I know the difference in those I mean, what I know to be true for me, Heather, is that I've said this before many times. I have left institutions because their stated values weren't their lived values.
Mm.
Um, and then really it became a part of me that I want to be a leader whose values, my own and the organizations or divisions, were lived. When I really do believe many, if not all of us, are striving to
Yes.
create belonging and people mattering. And I believe that to be true. And I think that there are some places that hit the mark and some places that miss the mark. I think that part of what allows us to miss the mark is that if leaders feel like they've got to always get it right, right? So I think about the times that staff members, like Earl and I can spend time giving you like 40 examples of things that we're trying to do, right? And then I'll be in a space where a person might say they don't feel like they belong. And I could be like, one response might be like, you got to be kidding. If you've seen this and this and this and this and this and this and this. Or what I can do is say, help me understand. Like, to not run away from it, to sit it, not to sit in it with them. Like, I think lots of times leaders feel like they've got to get it right. And if they're caught on the carpet, then they've got to show and demonstrate how they're getting it right. And I think the places where people feel like they matter and they belong, or they feel seen and they feel heard. And so when there is pushback, and there will be, because it's part of the human experience, and I actually want it. Like that just creates a
That's
better.
healthy. Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I think that lots of times people get afraid. I was in a meeting recently with a colleague that literally was challenged. She turned to her leadership team and was like, "Can someone help me out here?" I was like, "Wow, how about that?" Like no judgment. It was clear to me this person has to do the work. They haven't done their work. I can't tell you how many times I've said to a colleague, like, "I am so sorry that your experience. I am so sorry you felt that way. I'm so sorry that what I said was misunderstood or misinterpreted. I'm sorry, but I want to, you matter and I want to do better." And so I think being able to do those things means you've had to have done a lot of your work. I often say to people that you can experience a person who's like this or a person who's like this. And my sense of the person who's like this is a person who's done a lot of their own work. They understand their biases, triggers, reactions, and I want people to experience a responsive leader, not a reactive leader. And that really is about doing your work. So I think mattering cultures where people feel like they belong. And it's not just about one leader, it's about lots of leaders. That's why we're investing in our people. The other thing I think to this is that in the Division of Student Affairs, our vision is every student thrives. That's our vision. Every student thrives. None of us are thriving all the time, but we want to create the conditions for students to thrive. And we have very explicit conversations, very explicit, that never happens unless we're thriving too.
Right.
We put students first, we invest in our people. They go hand in hand. And so I think lots of organizations just do focus on the students. And students, we have to. They're the reason we're here. Maybe never forget our students. And it has to be partnered with the investment in our people if you're committed to learning and belonging and mattering.
That's great. So I have two more questions. One is kind of our standard boilerplate closing question, but before I get to that, I always want to kind of end with, like, if you had to give advice, or if you could give somebody who's listening to this today something to think about or rethink about, that they're carrying, what would you tell that person who, like, maybe just needs to start somewhere? How would you help kind of them think through how they actualize some of these practices within their spheres of influence on their campuses?
That's my mind is going a million different places, and if I'm going to bottom line it, I think it's the acknowledgement that there are real things that need to be explored from a systems level approach. And I think that's a hard thing, right? And I would just ask people to get curious about it. What is being rewarded in your department that may not be said? Why haven't we updated Susie's job description after 7 years and she's talking about burnout? and we didn't fill that position, yada, yada, yada. So I would just ask from a systems, if you're a leader listening, get curious about what systems may be arising in your culture that may be tripping you up. In addition to how do we support supervisors as well, and getting curious about their needs and what excellence in supervision looks like for your institution would be my two things.
That's great.
I'm like, girl, I've got just 1,000 ideas and I'm trying to, pull one. I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that caring is both institutional or community responsibility as well as an individual responsibility. So if one of my colleagues around the country is listening to this and they're not feeling cared for, or they want to be in an environment where there's a greater sense of care, I would begin with self. I would begin to ask myself the questions, what are the things that I need in my life to feel more cared for or paid attention to, or I mattered, or what are the things that are happening that don't make me feel that way? To get really, really clear, because as we get more clear about what those things are, we help visualize them, we can help step into them and bring them forward. And I would ask that once we do some of that self work, that we talk to a trusted colleague or an ombudsman person or a colleague like Earl, who you can talk to about everything and anything. So that first some of that self work would be done. And at the same time, that they might lead even their own efforts or speak up about institutional or divisional efforts that aren't creating the conditions for people to do really well and right.
As you were talking about that, I was thinking about how, we use the phrase, hurt people,
Yeah.
Cared for people, care for people.
Yes.
And so doing that for yourself, gathering care around you. And I think the resources on our campuses are tremendous, right? So if you have an employee assistance program on your campus, or you have some kind of ombuds, the ombuds office is always a great resource. I think about, utilizing those because they're free, right? Often a part of your employee benefit plan is accessing those resources. So I love the doing your own work. And then I think the piece about the systems level approach, right? We talk on my campus a lot about how we're not here to fix students. We're here to fix the institution.
That's right.
So that every student can learn, thrive, and graduate. So what does that mean to have an institutional deficit response versus a student deficit response?
Yeah.
So flipping that to.
That's right. And Heather, one of the things that we say, very similar to what you say, we say that we it's not that the institution is ready for the students to be ready. We want, wait, how do we say it? Let me see it's right. I think for a long time we were focused on making sure students were ready for the institution versus the institution ready for the students, right? And so that switch is really positive and very affirming. And that's a systems level approach, right? And it's not a deficit, it's the growth model, which is really important.
Yeah. Well, this brings us to the end of our conversation. I always love to end with this podcast is called Student Affairs Now. What are you thinking about, pondering, considering now? And then if you would like people to get in touch with you, share your LinkedIn or whatever you would like to share. And Patty, I'll start with you.
What am I thinking about? I got into this profession, first generation college student where education transformed me. And I knew that I wanted to stay in education to make sure that the Patty Perillos of the world didn't get lost, because I could have gotten totally lost as a first generation college student. And I also knew it was a privilege to be educated. And with that privilege came lots of responsibility. And so what I spend my time still thinking about is what are the ways that I continue to invest in human development. There is no doubt in our jobs, not just vice presidents, but all of our jobs, the administrative responsibility, the reports, the deadlines, whether it's people are trying to get you through Messenger or text messages or G chats, or it just comes at us, right? It's so easy for all of that to take us away from our central why, our central calling, our central purpose. And so, what I still think a lot about is how am I making the world more humane and just? What is my responsibility to do so? And how do I continue to invest in human development so that people thrive, communities thrive, and institutions thrive?
Thank you so much, Patty.
Thank you, Heather.
Beautiful.
Earl,
Beautiful.
how about you? What are you thinking about, pondering, considering?
Yeah, very similar to Patty. I think my lens is the responsibility that I have to the Earl Cabellons out there who look like me, that haven't got a seat at the table. And I remember vividly, in my time, I said, when I get to this level, I will lead in ways that will support the Earls who wanted to advance and wanted to get to this level. And so I'm pondering that. I'm fighting for it. And I think it goes back to why we're here today. It's to talk about this creating communities of courage and care. And for me as a Filipino American male, the responsibility that I have to others, for people of color, to be at the seat and at the table is an immense responsibility that I hold so dearly. And I will continue to do this work and do it in thoughtful and caring ways. So that's what I'm pondering.
And doing, not just pondering, you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Heather, what about you? What are you pondering?
Oh my goodness. I think right now we're in this period of hiring. And so I'm really thinking about what you were talking about, Earl, of like how we onboard people and bring people into a community. We have multiple new leaders coming into our institution, and I have two new team members joining my team. So I'm thinking a lot about like, who do I want to be and how do I want to show up as a leader within the space? As we move into our next kind of annual cycle. It's downtime right now, but that gives you a lot of time to think and ponder, which I love. Well, it is very clear to me why the University of Maryland College Park is one of the most promising places to work in student affairs. It is such a joy to spend time with you both today. And I am so grateful for just learning from your wisdom, hearing your experiences. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. It's awesome. And for everybody else who's watching and listening, thank you for joining us on Student Affairs Now. If you enjoyed this episode, one of the best ways you can support Student Affairs Now is by subscribing, leaving us a 5-star review, sharing this conversation with a colleague, maybe hosting a watch party on your campus. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with others. That helps our algorithm bring this information to more people. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you can connect more deeply with us in Student Affairs Now community through our Patreon. We have always been more than just a podcast. We're a learning community for people who care about higher education and student affairs. So through our Patreon, you will find discussion guides, facilitated book clubs, bonus content, and other opportunities to engage with colleagues and continue the conversation. So if this podcast have ever sparked an idea, challenged your thinking, or helped you feel more connected to the field, we'd love to have you join us. And you can find out more at patreon.com/studentaffairsnow. Huge shout out, as always, to Nat Ambrosi, our incredible producer. Nat, your behind the scenes brilliance makes every episode possible, and we are so grateful for you. And finally, to all of our listeners and viewers, thank you for being a part of our learning community. I'm Heather Shea. Thanks for watching and listening. Take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and let's make it a great week.